Good morning, everyone. Today we're doing another episode of the Saturday Artist Live Interviews podcast, but due to scheduling issues for this episode, we had to do it on a right now.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, cool.
My camera got turned off. I hit my thumb with it, and I didn't realize it was off, so sorry about that.
That happens, man. That happens. That's why I always like double check the permissions for apps, because there's always something that gets turned off.
Yeah, I don't know. Instagram just is so complicated to me. I mean, I've done a lot of stuff on it, but I still, like, right at the moment that you're supposed to get it, it's something kind of goes screwy. So, but I'm here, man.
So true.
Yeah.
So, why don't you introduce yourself and what kind of art you do?
My name is Stephen Lestat. I guess I was written by Morgan. Actually, wrote it. I'm a post-apocalyptic artist and actor, but I don't know if the actor doesn't go with the post-apocalyptic part really. So, and my art is post-apocalyptic. I guess that's really the only way to describe it. It's a combination of a lot of things. A lot of sculpture, which is repurposed. I think they're more like assemblages, so they're repurposed objects into assemblages of things you might find in a post-apocalyptic world, like ray guns and time machines. That kind of thing. So, yeah.
It's almost like a sci-fi type vibe, or
yeah. I think I get labeled steampunk, and I'm not really. I've been doing it for so long that I don't even think of it as steampunk. It's more like science fiction, post-apocalyptic. I think a lot of it incorporates things that are actually in science, and they drift into this fictional make-believe kind of world. Sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't. You know?
How did that kind of post-apocalyptic idea, how did that lead its way into your art?
I think it was influences from way back, and I think when I was a kid, we lived in New York City, Manhattan, part-time, and we had an apartment right around the corner from the Guggenheim Museum. So the sitter used to take me over there, and I think that influenced me. And later on, I got to go to the Museum of Modern Art, and all the museums in New York. And I think the one that I remember as a kid was Salvador Dali, and I think that actually pushed me in a direction that I realized you don't have to make things, don't have to look the way that you believe the world sees them. You can make them look however you want, depending on how you see it. And then it sort of like gave me a free, a free hand to look at the world and then express the world the way I wanted to see it. And for some reason, I just took on that post-apocalyptic kind of idea of what would the world look like if we were not in this type of society, if society switched over to something, Mad Max kind of thing, I guess, without so much violence.
So when did you start doing art? Was it when you were a child, like, and you saw the Dali thing that you started kind of getting?
Yeah. We did finger painting in kindergarten, and I did this finger painting, and I think this led me to realize that I could get reactions from people, good or bad. Like I could promote something to them and let them feel whatever they were supposed to feel from it. And I did a finger painting, and I can see it in my mind's eye, and it was on white paper, and I took blue. I must have taken blue fingerprint paint, whatever that was, watercolor probably, and just gone like this. And my father, bless him, he put it up. He got it framed really nice and put it up in our apartment in Manhattan, which I thought was great as a little kid. I wish I still had it. I don't know where it went. So I think early on I just had that sense. My mother was an artist, and she was fantastic. She used to paint figures like on horses, and they were, when I think about it now, they were almost post-apocalyptic in the way that they were depicted. So it's perhaps that I picked up from that, So, yeah.
Little familial influences. So
yeah.
Where did you learn to polish the art skills that you got?
I'm self-taught. I did go to the Rhode Island School of Design for photography, but not as a full student. I did it back then. They didn't have a thing called Running Start, so it was kind of like the the high school that I was in didn't really know what to do with me because I was a terrible student. I wouldn't show up to class, and I would go, be out in the field looking at bugs and stuff like that. So they kind of thought, well, maybe back then they didn't, in the 60s, they didn't have the wherewithal now to see that somebody might think or look at the world differently and give them the opportunity to explore that. But they did. They sent me to a photography class at Rhode Island School of Design, and I did the first one, and then I did the advanced. And I think at that point, I started to see the world through the lens of the camera, realizing that I could adjust what I saw. So I would do things like, before we had Photoshop or any of that, I took a roll of film of a graveyard, and I took it, and I knew that the emulsion could crack if it was under pressure. So I took the film and I put it in tinfoil, and I put it in the freezer I put it in the oven really low for like an hour, and then I put it in the freezer and froze it, thinking that it would crack the emulsion. And I brought it down to the photography, place where you go get your film developed. And I didn't say anything. And he came back and he goes, "Oh, it came out really horrible, man. It's all cracked." And it did exactly what I wanted. So I had that looking through a broken glass kind of effect. So, and then I went on and I started doing photography contests when I was a kid. And I won the Rhode Island, all Rhode Island Salon, and I was 18. And if you're sitting there during the presentations, and it was in an auditorium at University of Rhode Island. No, it was at Brown University. I remember sitting there, and my girlfriend said, we should just go, because like I had submitted like 3 photographs, one of a Bible that I had set up on a table with a projector and a slide in it, making it look like stained glass was going over it. And I put a fake feather pen down, and I had some ink on the side, and it was a Bible open to it was a huge Bible open to a picture of Mary holding Jesus. And I just thought it would be an interesting subject. It was iconic. And so it won the competition for the slide, the best slide or something. And they invited me up to the stage, and I had to get up and tell how I did it. And I was this long-haired 18-year-old kid with dirty clothes on, and all these people in the audience, a lot of them were professional photographers. And I got lucky. And it's, sometimes that's what it is with judges. Look at it and they like it, and you're in. And they started asking me questions like, what sort of machine did you use to trap the light, and what sort of camera, and I just said, I explained I took a slide projector and just told them how I did this kind of guerrilla style or whatever. And God, those guys were pissed. The guys in the audience, they were just like angry. I'm like, I don't understand, it's just art, man. So.
Do you still do photography now?
I do, yeah. On my website, artifactalchemy.com. That's sort of the warehouse for my art. I started a t-shirt business, so that's a different deal right now. But there's a section in there for photography, and photography I think was my first love, and I go back to it when I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed by the other stuff that I'm doing, especially the stuff that involves like mathematics and philosophy and all my drawings and stuff. So if I get overwhelmed, I can go back to photography and it calms me down. So there is some photography on there.
What's your favorite stuff or your favorite subject to photograph?
I think people. I really like to draw. Sort of, people in I like photographing people in natural situations where they actually don't know they're being photographed, and then you have to get permission later.
Yeah.
Which is kind of sticky sometimes. But I think I enjoy putting people in certain places. A lot of it is post-apocalyptic, now that I think of it, where I can use props from my art. So there's a couple that I took of a cosplay artist from Spokane, Taylor Ritchie, and we did a whole photo shoot, and I took a lot of my props, especially some of the bigger ray guns, and had him using those, and he used one of his costumes, and it was fantastic. It looked really good. So I think I enjoy making that world up in the photography and putting that person in that world,
Mm-hmm.
which is fun.
Is there any other forms of art that you do?
Yeah, well, I do the sculpture. I do. I don't know what you'd call it. It's a type of, well, but I draw the bugs, alien bugs, and alien anatomy, which I did a whole series on alien anatomy, which was up at Mad Lab for a while. But I think I don't really know how to describe what it is, but it's these posters, and they're like a collage of my ideas. And these ideas kind of blend into a subject or a theme. They're extremely difficult to put a finger on. They are based on like maybe a post-apocalyptic society or a time traveler trying to display or trying to talk about what they've been through. One of them is a time travel memorial, and it was up at Mad Lab, and a lot of people don't know it had a cross in it, and the cross had photographs of people that I had manipulated, that I had taken off the internet, and they were free. They were open source, but I still felt funny doing it. But I modified them, and it was so many of them. It was almost impossible to give credit because sometimes there was no credit with them. They were just open source on the internet. So a lot of my other art is drawing, and I didn't really start drawing until COVID. I just sat down with a paper and a pen, and I just said, okay, and I started drawing these lines, and then I would take the drawing that I had done, start filling it in a little bit, and then photograph it, flip it into Photoshop, and then double it. And there's a name for that in art, and I don't have an art degree, so I don't know what the name of that is, but I would get the mirror image of it, and then I would manipulate those, and then sometimes print them and then redraw over them. So I didn't really start drawing at all until COVID, and so that kind of took off. So all during COVID, I just started drawing. Like the piece behind me is actually, I think, one of those pieces. So it's so that I do a lot of different art, and I can't really. So when people say, "What do you do?" I just tell them to go to my website. You know.
So why bug?
What's that?
Why bugs? Like why do you draw so many aliens?
Well, what interesting is that I started just allowing myself to draw shapes, whatever I wanted, to see what would happen. And a lot of the shapes that I came up with turned out to be these shapes that are prevalent organically in nature. And I didn't realize that until I saw somebody else's art. And I went, oh my God, that's the same shape that I draw, that I start as a basis from. And I realized that there's this, I don't know what you call it philosophically, but there's this like organic thing, that level of consciousness, maybe this collective unconscious that Jung talks about, that we have archetypes, maybe, that we start drawing these things that are basically archetypes, and interesting, like Plato said that, we make these, that's not a tree, that's the representation of the real tree, right? If you call them forms, I think, and right, and so I thought, well, maybe this is sort of what Plato was saying philosophically, that we're drawing these things because I'm not unique in the stuff that I draw. What's unique is the way I put it together, which is the way I see the world. But what really fascinated me was that I started to see that shape everywhere, and I don't know if that's the thinking that I'm creating, that I'm looking for. Like if you buy a Volkswagen, it seems like everybody has a Volkswagen. It may be that. What's that?
Pattern seeking.
Yeah, pattern
Your
seeking.
brain kind of pattern.
Pareidolia, I think. Yeah, pareidolia, I think they call it. Yeah. It could be that, and it could be biased, information biased, where I don't realize it, but I'm looking for those things that support my my belief or what I'm doing. You know what I mean? So I'm not sure, but I know that the patterns that I started to draw were very addicting, and they started to fit together, but that they're not unique. The patterns, the lines, and the way they're drawn isn't unique because it's in nature. So.
Yeah, I like that idea of, like you were talking about, because as soon as you started talking about the Jung thing, I was like, it reminds me of Plato's idea of form.
Yeah. Yeah, right,
like,
the forms, yeah.
Yeah, that's like his whole thing, is that everything that we can see and touch is only just kind of, I don't know, I would consider it like, so like imagine, like, for people that don't know, and what Plato's talking about. Like, imagine a little statue sitting on a table.
Yeah.
And you have like three different light sources, and so there's three different cast shadows,
Right.
and they all have different shapes.
Yeah.
And so, like what we see in, like, as you were talking about the tree,
Yeah.
what we see as that individual tree is just a shadow of its universal
Right.
form,
Right.
which is this, like, or as Jung talked about, his archetype.
Yeah.
Kind of collective unconscious.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Plato's cave.
Yeah.
You know, where you're just sitting there and all you see your whole life is the shadows. But what's really happening behind you is not that. That's just what you're perceiving, right? And that actually does go along with Jung's archetypes. I mean, those shadows may be the archetypes, and we're not really seeing the real world, which is a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down. But, you know, the idea that we're not actually seeing what the world really is, you know, and there's so many different philosophical bends towards our reality, because then you get into, okay, what is reality? So describe reality, right? Which, you know, which just goes down this rabbit hole, you know? Or assimilation theory. You know, we could be living in assimilation, which I've been studying I've been reading about it for about a month now. And, you know, I took it, you know, kind of skeptically, and then you start reading about it, and it's fascinating. A lot of physicists are starting to look at it as a way to actually explain a lot of the way the quantum world is, you know, the lower lens of the quantum world. So
there does appear to be at least a limit of how small you can go, which, like, at least would be some kind of indication that there's a resolution to the universe. So there's a resolution.
Yeah, exactly.
Creating.
Yeah. Well, they did. There was one. There's a couple of groups of physicists and theoretical physicists that are looking at ways to prove it. And then there's a group that are, you know, looking for those tiny little bits of information which are at that level, at the quantum level, could describe that the universe is made of those, you know. And was it Aristotle said that, you know, the world is made of atoms? Yeah, right. The atoms, you know, he came up with that word, which is pretty phenomenal because he didn't have a microscope. You know, he had no way to look at it. It was just that thinking, you know. Yeah.
Really interesting to see how a relatively small group of Greek people about 2,500 years ago, just thinking about stuff without any proof whatsoever. There's like, guys like, you know what, I bet the world's made of water. Then some other guy is like, yeah, I don't think so. So they just start talking it out, and then one guy's like, you know what, it's made of these really, really tiny bits, like little triangles, and they all fit together.
Yeah.
And then eventually someone turns it into, like, that could work. And then you get atoms, and we get all of our stuff from people like thousands of years ago, just slowly over time developing theories, layers upon layers. Yeah,
it is amazing. And, you know, you read from what I understand, the minds of people back then were the same. They had the same ability to think and contemplate and reason and see patterns as we do. But that gradual progression of technology, which leads from one step to another, it's like it doesn't all seem to happen at once. You know, it might have for Da Vinci and Nostradamus, they might have seen the big picture somehow, you know, boom, right? But it seems to go in these stages and these levels, you know. And when you think about how long that we've been on the planet, modern man, it's so small of you know, of a thing. There was a website that I looked at. It was called Skunk Bear, and what they do is they take questions that you send them, and then they put them into visual. They answer them visually for you. So somebody sent a question, was how long has modern man been on the planet? So they set up this thing on a football field, and the guy was a set of lights in a roll, and he would kick the roll, and he got it down to the 10-yard line. And he started explaining what was on this planet basically at that time. And he gets all the way down to the 6-inch line, and he says, okay, this is where man has been, you know, man developed, the humans developed, right? And he goes down to like, you can't even see it. He goes, the filament of a light bulb in the length of the football field was modern man, right? You know,
oh my God.
I know, and that just like blew my mind. And to think that we, you know, have figured out, quotes, that much of what's in back of us, I don't know if we really could. I don't know if we've got it right. Even though there's the archaeology and the carbon dating and all of that, it almost just seems like there could have possibly been another civilization here way before us. Way before us.
Well, honestly, it goes back to that whole thing of like, ancient peoples figuring stuff out, like that to get where we are now. We are the ancients of people in like 3,000-4,000 years. So like what we have now, even though we think it's so highfalutin and awesome technology, it's going to be like ancient technology in a couple thousand years.
Oh yeah.
And people won't care about it. But, like all the stuff that we think is accurate now, probably going to be disproven. And like not all of it, a good chunk of it, or at least how we think it works. Because we observe certain things, but we don't always know exactly how things work.
And somebody said that people thinking we're living in a simulation shows just how young we are. That's an absolute truth, because we may be with simulation theory. There's the idea of the base reality, the base reality, and I think for what you want to say about Elon Musk, I don't know how he did say there's a 50% chance that we live in a base reality, and that was actually said by Neil deGrasse Tyson. He said that, and it was all based on a paper by Nick Bostrom from Oxford, who said, and back in 2003 or something, who said he wondered if are we actually living in a simulation? And he's a philosopher, so he did the probability. He did a whole paper of probability, which became known as simulation theory. The probability that we are the base reality, that we are the first of that, is I don't know, to me that doesn't seem right. I mean, we're probably, and if you look at, we're creating simulations of ourselves, right? And that was the basis. One of the bases of this paper was that we're doing it, right? And so in another 20 years, it is expected that the virtual reality that we're going to create will be undistinguishable from our reality, which makes you go back to that question: what is reality, right? Yeah. Is that the reality? Is this reality? Is dreaming a reality? But yeah, it's amazing to think. I think as humans, our ego or whatever has put us in a position of saying that we've figured all this out, therefore this is the way it's going to be, and this is the way it's been. And I just don't think we have the capability to actually see that, especially when you think about how long we've actually been here, how minute it is, the time.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I think about is, okay, so a comet hit and killed off all the dinosaurs millions of years ago. And we are still discovering different species of animals from back then.
Yeah.
Why couldn't there have been like a sentient animal or like dinosaur that had not necessarily opposable thumbs, but like an apparatus where it can, have like digits that manipulate things?
There was a guy named Russell in Canada that I back in '98, I think, I was surfing and I saw this on the internet. And this guy Russell, he was a paleontologist, I think, but he wanted to know if there was a dinosaur, just like you're saying, that could have evolved, what would it look like? And what dinosaur might have done that? And he knew dinosaurs, and he picked out this one that was I forget the name of it. It's a sauropod, but the name of it was Astononychus aniculus, and I remember that. I don't know why. Don't ask me. I'm not trying to impress anybody. It just sticks in my head. And it was about the size of a turkey, I think, and it had the intelligence. They don't know for sure, but they believe it had the intelligence of a really smart turkey or a squirrel, and it had an opposable digit. So he posited that what would this look like? So he hired a sculptor that came in, an anatomist, and they developed and built this thing. And the name is Russell, and it's very big on the internet if you look in the right places. And it was a sauropod, I think, but it actually became the basis of the reptilian idea of the reptilian aliens too. When I looked at that, actually, that was a big influence on my idea of the whole alien worlds and working with that too. But yeah, it was amazing to look at. It was like he believed that, and what's really creepy is that it does look like the gray aliens, And he wasn't trying to do that. I don't think he even, I think it was before Whiteley Strieber came out with the book Communion with the guys.
Great book.
I think it was before that. So he actually drew this, and it looks very similar to the gray aliens too, which is interesting. But I agree with you. I mean, why isn't it possible that, that a society, Graham Hancock talks about that, why couldn't there have been a society here way more advanced than us, and then either left or developed the technology that we're here now,
Like, honestly, like, if we're already trying to leave Earth, as
Yeah.
Elon Musk is trying to colonize Mars, if there was another sentient life form that had similar intelligence to us, or at least comparable, I should say, because it might not be similar, but it might be like the same level of being able to do stuff. So if they could have our technology, wouldn't they have like already left and like started?
They could, or right, actually, and the Greys, and somebody else wrote this, and I read a couple of papers on a book on it. The Greys actually could be us coming back to look at us. It could be time travel in that sense, and they're studying us. And kind of like the Star Trek, don't get involved, or don't, the prime directive, right? Don't interfere. It could be like that, and I think for a while I thought that was one of the most probable, because it explains, other than simulation theory, it actually explains the alien problem. If you want to look at that as, number one, a problem, number two, as reality or something that we're seeing. And there's enough evidence out there that we're being visited by, or there is something else here that we don't really understand. And that it could have been here for a long, long, long time. But the idea that, the abduction stuff where, people are seeing the Greys and the aliens, and they're walking, and they have 2 feet, they have 2 arms, they have eyes, slits maybe for a mouth and maybe a nose. But the idea that they have that same physiological makeup as us in a way, that they can walk, it makes you wonder, really, could they be us coming back to visit, to look at us? I mean, we do that now with our technology. We're building worlds where we're going in, and you can battle in the 1500s. I mean, we're going back to look at that. They may be the archaeologists coming back. Yeah.
And also, like what Everest is saying in the comments, why would such an advanced race play with our genetics? Obviously, to obtain something they now lack. I remember, I think I heard in like Joe Rogan podcast, we were talking about how some people talk about them as not being able to reproduce at all or anymore. Like they're genderless now, at least in the whatever the Greys are in the future. They no longer be able to reproduce. They have to come back in time to get genetic material to make more.
Yeah, it's kind of like John Titor came back to get a part from a computer, right? The time traveler.
Exactly.
But yeah, I agree, and I think that actually explains a lot of the unfortunate experiences of people who are kidnapped or abducted, quote abducted, who are pregnant, and there's stories of women that have gone back and they've got to see their child, and it's and you can't, like Ann said, the archetype, but you can't really say that X over here who had no knowledge of what X over here said, but yet they're communicating the same thing. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm still fascinated by instances of, you could say like, I don't know, just the collective unconscious manifesting multiple things at the same time. Like the guy that invented aluminum, the 2 guys that invented aluminum both at the same time.
That happens throughout history. The pyramid.
Leibniz and Newton inventing calculus at the same time. Like a mathematical theory that no one has ever seen on Earth at all.
Yeah. Well,
at the same time, 2 guys are like, I'm going to write this down.
Yeah. Well, television is actually like that too. You had Farnsworth, kid in high school, right, or junior high school, who comes up with an idea, and it had been working on, and there were different types in Europe and stuff. But I mean, this kid in high school comes up with this idea, who his science teacher can't even figure out what it is, and gives it to the mayor or something, who calls a buddy of his, and then they send down Phillips electronics, and they work on it. He dies broke, right? Doesn't get credit for it, but except in a few TV shows where they say that they call the device a Farnsworth, which is, was him, right? But helicopter, Sikorsky, it was already won in Europe at the same time. And they didn't have social media back then. And just like you're saying, back in the days of the mathematics, they didn't have that communication, up until 100 years ago, you were delivering letters. If I were to communicate with you in Europe, it would take months, for us to have one letter back and forth to each other,
I think it's fascinating, like human coordination. It's unintended, like how, as far as we know, it was uncoordinated that like the Giza pyramid, the pyramids in Mexico.
Yeah.
There's another set of pyramids. They're all set, pointed towards like Orion belt. So they're all lined. And we just like, you know what? This is important. Let's all build their stuff pointing right at that.
Yeah. Let's all do that. But how did they know to do that? Have you heard the Dogon tribe? And
yes,
I think they're right.
Star Sirius. Yeah.
Yeah. They said that they came from that their leader, I forget who it was, came from the Sirius, but they didn't know what it was, but they pointed in the sky, right? And they said that that it came from this other point next to Sirius, I think it was, but it was Sirius B but they knew this hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And then when science actually found that star, they realized that that's what they were talking about. And you can't tell me that's a coincidence, if they knew that they came from a star that wasn't even visible to them, that's pretty crazy, And the word dragon, right? The word dragon, dragon, dogon, that word of a water serpent, right, has been around in every culture, which is crazy. And so is the flood. Right?
Yeah.
The flood is in every culture,
Yeah, and even like the ancient Greek, I think that highly possible that during the Ice Age there was a huge flood. That's why we have all these like the Bible stories.
Yeah.
Noah's Prometheus climbing up a mountain with his wife.
Well, right.
Before the flood.
Yeah.
There's like the even older ancient Sumerian, like Gilgamesh one.
Yeah.
I can't remember the original Noah's name from that one. It's a really long name.
Yeah.
Gilgamesh one. And they found an even older tablet.
Yeah.
With it. And then the one in Mexico and like all these different flood stories.
I think most archaeologists agree that at some point there was something devastated as a flood, And it's funny because the Dogon talk about how their god was a water god and it came out from the water, and and then you get into the whole reptile thing, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's a connection there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Reptiles are really prominent in lots of the gods, at least the old ones, especially like you have like Quetzalcoatl, the feathered being the civilization bringer. And what was the then there's the one that Marduk slays, which is not like a reptile, but it's the Tiamat, like the sea serpent, half fish lady thing.
Right.
Kills. And so like there's tons of like
you wonder
giant water.
Yeah, you wonder if those myths didn't come out of the flood, didn't come out from the flood.
Mm-hmm.
Because we relate to the universe, we imagine and make up characters like we do now, like I do in my drawing, and you do. We make up these characters based on our surroundings. We see patterns in our surroundings, and you wonder if they weren't seeing, if they're born out of a culture that came from the water, as the water dissipated, and the land masses started to get separated, where those myths may have caught on from distant lands, and just be related to the fact that there was so much water. You know what I mean? If you look at Native American tribes, a lot of the Native American tribes, if you mention UFOs, they're just like, yeah, whatever. They've been here for, it's like, it's nothing new to them. It's like the idea of a large humanoid figure in the woods. They know that. They lived with that their whole life. That's not something new. They kind of look at us and go, yeah, why are you so Yeah, it's there. It's always been there.
right?
Right?
And responding to Apparatus' comment, reading a book on Atlantis, I would recommend, if you haven't already, read The Timaeus by Plato. It's
Yeah.
where he first talks about
Yeah,
Atlantis.
yeah.
It is fascinating.
Yeah. Something, yeah.
Also check out Graham Hancock's book, Supernatural. I
Yeah.
think that has some pretty good.
He's got a series on Netflix right now,
Yep.
which is really
Great.
causing some controversy because a lot of it, and I'm not gonna. There's no spoiler here, but it starts off kind of like really scattered, and you're like, okay, well, I like your theories and your ideas, but this isn't coming together for me as even a theory right now. I mean, you've got little bits and pieces, but apparently, and I haven't seen all of it, it does come together. The series does come together, and he's pissed off a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of archaeologists. And because they're threatened, and I think, and pardon me if you're a scientist, but I think science is always so threatened by change. And and I can understand that in a way. But if you look back at history, the world is flat. Well, really? Okay, well, maybe it's round.
Mhm.
No, 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 no. We're the center of the universe. No, we're not.
Well, I would say it's not necessarily science, but like scientism, because I believe that there are science is a great method for trying to process hard truth.
Yeah.
The problem is that when someone discovers what they think is a hard truth, they hold on to that. So it's not, then they don't want to retest it. After they accept something, it's like, oh, this is true
Yeah.
all the time, no matter what. They don't want to retest it later on.
Right.
So it's more like human egoism, like believe, like,
Yeah.
I believe this thing because
Yeah.
I've done this a certain amount of time, therefore you can't question it ever again. No one can ever question it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That's the whole point of science, is like you question it every
Sure.
single time because
Yeah, you have to. You have to. And then, you've got information bias comes in when you're, if you're looking at a non-peer reviewed paper, you can see that a lot of times in things like simulation theory or integrated information theory, the fact that the idea that a complicated enough system might have consciousness, which is what I think the Allen Institute or Microsoft has been working on for years, is trying to recreate the human brain in a way, thinking that complicated a system will eventually develop its own consciousness, and I don't know, so the entropy of the system, which is information, could become more information and could eventually posit a look on the world or on itself as something we can't even comprehend, kind of like lambda, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I would. Have you ever heard of Sir Roger Penrose?
I've heard of the name.
His dad and he were friends. You know MC Escher, of course.
Yeah.
Artist, of course you know him. But he was friends with Sir Roger Penrose's dad and himself, and especially lots of Escher stuff on infinity and things that loop back and forth.
Yeah.
A lot of the math he would check with Penrose for his tiling stuff. He's fascinated by that. But he has a whole thing where he differentiates awareness versus understanding. So he thinks
interesting.
that understanding, like what we consider like true consciousness, understanding, is non-computation. And he has a hard time even defining consciousness. It's like it's nothing.
Right, I've read about this. Yeah, it's a very difficult thing to even say. It's like words are limiting, so you really can't describe something that's omnipotent because it is everything, right?
Exactly.
So it's like, right, how can you describe God if God is? You can't describe the Sufis, I think it was, said that you can't describe God with words because God is all words.
Exactly.
Right? So you can't describe something that's omnipotent with any words, right? It's limiting, right?
Yeah, or like in the Tao Te Ching, the Tao that can be described is not the true Tao.
Yeah.
So it's not. If we could describe true consciousness, it wouldn't be true consciousness.
Right. Exactly.
It wouldn't have the resolution of what it really is.
Yeah. Right. I think that's exactly what's happening, or what we are. In a way, we can come up with the idea of what we are, what our purpose is, but I don't think we would know. It's like, why would back to simulation theory, why would you build a the more you can't, I love apparatus. Why would you build a system? There has to be, and I'm at a point in my studying of that I'm trying to comprehend reasons or ideas. Why would you build a system that eventually knew it was a system? You know, I mean, you're doing that with computers in a way, or we should be actually. But if you build a simulation, if we are a simulation, how is it that we could possibly know that we're a simulation? That had to be programmed in, or it could be that we, because we're a complicated system, as integrated information theory, we've developed our own consciousness. And in that, we've moved on. So they may have created us and gone, oh shit, you know, they know what's going on, you know. And there's a group of physicists. I read a paper which, you know, is way out of my purview, right? It was just so many, had to look up every other word. But it stated basically that they're trying to find a way to break out of the simulation. If we are in a simulation, there has to be a way to break out of it. And I thought, you know, that's interesting. But would you build a system to allow? What would be the reason for that? Except for you would go on and create other worlds, other systems, other simulations, right?
If there is a simulation, what prevents it from being all encompassing? Like it's like having a computer on its own versus a computer hooked up to the internet. Why couldn't the simulation just be one thing that you can't break out?
Well, that's what I thought too. Or it's designed in such a way that you can't break out. And one of the doctors said, one of the physicists said, you'll know it when every computer screen in the world says, you're in a simulation, hold on, we'll explain it to you later. It's like everyone comes up, every phone, every computer, right? Then you would have either somebody really good hacker or you'd have proof, you know? When you get into simulation theory too, you're getting into a quasi-religious aspect of it. You're looking at it, it's like saying, and there's a name for this in philosophy and I can't remember it, but it's the type of thinking that you can blame, you know, you can say it's the universe's will, or I say God. It's God's will. This happened, it's God's will. This happened, it's God's will. If you replace, and I'm not getting down on any religions at all. I have my own spiritual beliefs. But if you replace, I went back last night and I actually read Genesis, not all of it, but I replaced God with programmer. It's pretty scary because it works, you know, and you start to see the series in that. And that again is just that word programmer, which gives it that omnipotent thing. The word God does that. So it can describe everything. And I haven't really put that together in my head, but I thought, okay, so if we're a simulation and there's Genesis, perhaps Genesis, you know, let me go back and try that. And I tried it, and it was pretty fascinating. It's kind of creepy because you look at it and go, oh, well, yeah, quantum mechanics fits right here. You know, you start looking at it, right?
One thing you could also try doing is go to the Gospel of John and then replace the word with, or sometimes it's not translated, and it keeps it as logos, but if you translate the word into information, in the beginning was information.
Yes, right. I've seen that before, and it's very similar to the Course in Miracles, and I can't remember her name. You know, the Course in Miracles, where everything God is replaced with love, and that fits because love is almost it's such a subjective thing. It can be looked at objectively, you know, based on your subjective reality of what love is, right? So when you put the word love out there, which is you know, it means so many different things to different people, you know, really, that it covers the base of anything you say. Why did I fall off the cliff? Love was responsible, you know. Why did I break my foot? It was love. Why did I win the lottery? Love, you know. Or you could say programmer, you know, or you could say God, right? Yeah. It leaves that open, you know what I mean? We've gone way off the subject of art, haven't we?
Yeah, but it's a lot more fun.
Yeah.
What is art but visual philosophy?
That's a great look at it. I never actually thought of it that way. It is. I mean, again, it's such a subjective thing, right? Mm-hmm. Art, you know, the definition of art, you know. I think, for me, anyway, my opinion, the purest form of human art is dance. And it doesn't, and even if you're unable to dance the way that with your two legs and arms, there's movement is like the simplest, because and it's used. It was used. Still is used as to storytelling in the Alaskan Native tribes, Native Americans. The dance, that dance tells a story, and it's almost like it can tell the story without having any words, right? So it's like this universal form of communication. I don't know what art is. I know that one of the quotes I love, and it's on my website, is art should disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. And that was Cesar Cruz who wrote that. I didn't. But I like that reaction. I mean, because it causes a reaction in you, And I don't know about you, but if somebody looks at a piece of art that I've done and they go, "Oh, that's awful, that's horrible, that's disgusting. Why would somebody waste their time on that?" Well, then it's done its job, right? It's gotten you to think. And I think that's part of what art does, It gets you to think, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, exactly. That's one of my definitions. I have if you want to get into the whole what is art,
go for it.
That's one thing that's all I think about.
Okay.
I've had long discussions. I've had people walk out on me because of how my own views of art, which it's fine. People sometimes they get a little because our opinions are very precious to ourselves. I try to detach myself from all my opinions because this is just something that my brain has made up because of circumstances. Right. But my opinion or my definition of art is it comes under communication. So I think in Venn diagrams a lot. So you have communication being the big circle and art kind of hanging off of it, and a little bit has an intersection. Right. But as it's part of communication, because all art, like you're saying, dance, we'll put the major art, visual, gestural, so like dancing, lingual, singing, poetry, lyrics, prose. Basically, most art is usually just has to do with some kind of sense. If you think about it,
it appeals to the senses somehow, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But then, creative things come under communication, and then art under creative things. You have art and you have entertainment.
Okay.
The two separate things that can combine and can be kind of mixed back and forth with but they are two distinct things.
Right.
So art takes you into yourself. So when you're dancing, when you're doing interpretive dance, when you're hearing deep lyrics or song, or when you're seeing a visual image that communicates symbols. So it's symbolic creativity.
Okay.
Which all communication is symbolic, and then your creative activity, which is art, and then entertainment. Art takes you into yourself, makes you start thinking, you start interpreting the images. It's like a communication.
Right.
Where entertainment, which is also a creative act. I'm not saying any of these are uncreative. Entertainment is separate.
Okay.
It's about taking you out of yourself, where you're not thinking about the present stuff. You're taken out. You can enjoy the performance. Like the difference between a comedian that just makes you laugh versus a comedian that makes you think. One's an entertainer, one's an artist.
Okay.
That's how I kind of break it down. So an abstract piece of art can be pretty, but it's entertainment rather than art. And then you can have another abstract piece that's about something that makes you think. And then Picasso's, what's the one that famous when he did about the massacre and the Spanish Civil War?
Oh, right.
Yeah, so you have an abstract piece that's about something deep and heavy and symbolic,
right?
Rather than just pretty color.
So, are you saying that you believe that art is subjective to each person, right?
Your taste in art, whether you like a piece of art and it resonates with you, that is subjective.
Okay.
But whether something is art or isn't art is objective. So whether you like it or not is subjective, and your taste in art is subjective. But whether an object is art, I wouldn't say that my table that I paint on is art.
Yeah.
But if I put some symbols on it and then made it and then put it up as a piece, as an installation, then it has meaning, and then it becomes a piece of art.
Okay. Well, what about Decamp, or whatever his name was, that took the urinal, signed it, and put it up on a wall and during a Paris exposition? You're right. It is. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that art is also, well, I think that art is information. I mean, anything, but it's a very strange form of information because all those in the Venn diagram, those things that you said that crossed over and connect with each other, the one thing that they do have in common is information. It is all information, right? So it's the projection of information, I guess. I mean, I'm trying to, I agree with what you said. It doesn't, but then again, when I have an opinion, a subjective opinion about something, right? Okay, so if you were to look at that scientifically, could you pull that apart scientifically and come up with it? You've got a theory, and then could you start to prove that? Could you start to prove that as a viable way? But I don't think you could because it's so subjective, even though it's an object, right? Your view of that object is completely subjective in a way, right?
Well, it's the way I do it is more of I wouldn't say about something that can be proved as much as setting definitions for a word, because you can take a word and make it meaningless by applying it to everything.
Right. Okay. I agree. And I've often thought, and I don't want to get too far off the line here, but when I look at blue, how do I know you're seeing the blue that I'm seeing? Right. I mean, there's this, and I've tried to figure out a way. Is there a physical or mathematical way to try to prove that? And there isn't, because it's infinite. And you could take set theory and you could start to play with it that way, because set theory has a symbol that they positioned as infinity, which the letter, the word infinity, the mark of infinity gives you a balance. It helps you deal with things mathematically, right? It says, okay, we have this, and that's what that is. So I can deal with that based on this. I'm probably not making any sense.
I get what you're saying.
Right?
The whole I've thought about that a lot, as well as the blue that I see, the same blue as you see. We both see the same wavelength of light reflected.
Right.
Our minds interpret it differently.
We've had this discussion before, I think, at Mad Lab, and I agree with you. But then again, there's materialism. There's the philosophy of materialism, where the root philosophy of that. And if I look, the reason this book exists, the reason you exist right now, the reason my iPhone, that an apparatus is there, the reason that everyone is there right now is because I'm looking at it. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. And it's a really mind-bending, complicated way of looking at things. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think I saw it as materialism, but maybe that's what the better name for that philosophy is. That I thought that was something else.
No, I thought solipsism is like things only exist if you look at them. There's only
one.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then it blends. Right, it blends into materialism, and it actually blends into what Plato was saying too, because you're not seeing the real tree. You're seeing basically a representation of that tree, and everybody would see that differently, like a car accident. Everybody sees it from a different angle, like history in a lot of ways too. Yeah. No, I agree. I like your definition of art. As Apparatus said something about Duchamp. Just giving the middle finger, basically. Well, I look at it as I'm giving a middle finger to art. I mean, just saying it is whatever you want it to be. You know.
Well, even then, because he wrote something on it, he just put his name on it and then hung it. So therefore, it gets meaning. Because then it's meaningful because it makes people think, oh, why did he just take this and put this up there? It's not like, oh, that's pretty.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't think anybody thought a toilet's pretty, just hanging up.
Yeah.
So that
as an artist, you probably have this too, right? I do have that feeling like I want to do things like that sometimes, and I have done with some of my art. I've made a piece and just said, it's not saying fuck you, the establishment. It's not saying anything like that. It's just saying I have an idea of what it was that I made, and I put it up, and just everybody went wild, like, that's horrible. You can't do that. That's anti-Christian and blah blah blah. And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. But nobody ever asked me what I said, except for one person who was a minister. And then we both agreed on it. Right? So it was like, I mean, really, it's so subjective to me. You know what I mean? It's so subjective, based on who you are, right?
Mm-hmm. Everything's based on how you interpret it and everything that's happened before.
Yeah. Yeah. Far out, man.
How long we've been going?
Probably 4 hours. I don't know. I don't even have a clock available to me. It's exactly an hour.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll probably be finishing it up soon, but I still want to keep talking just for a little bit longer. But
I wanted to say, going back to the language and expression that we have as humans, there was a study, and I can't remember what it was in. I think it was in South America, where a home or a home for people who for children who couldn't speak or who could speak, but no, they couldn't speak was the thing, and they were left there and under supervision, but nobody was teaching them, and so the generation came up and they couldn't. The janitor or somebody watched them, and they were doing things with their hands, and he was like, "That's not sign language," because he knew sign language. And what he realized was it looked like they had developed their own language to communicate. So these researchers, and I'm just kind of quoting from what I remember, these researchers came down from like Harvard or Stanford and didn't interfere but watched. And they realized that they were actually communicating and had come up with their own language. And in their mind, thereby proving or postulating that communication or to develop a system of communication is a human instinct, which I thought was fascinating.
there's a book that you might like. It's pretty much the same title. It's called The Language Instinct.
I check it out. What's it called? The Language Instinct.
Yeah. I believe the guy's last name is Pinker.
If you could text it to me later, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll send you the picture of it. It's a fascinating book. He bases a lot of his stuff on Noam Chomsky's work.
Noam Chomsky. Yeah.
I have yet to dive into his stuff, but I know he's a linguist and he's all into language, messing with consciousness and vice versa. But it's fascinating to see how, as far as we know, we've always had language
We've
always had language.
Right.
We didn't develop it. It just was always there.
Yeah.
As far as we know. And so they're trying to figure out the evolution of it.
Yeah.
Now, because the further you go back, the more complicated the language gets.
Well, apparently, from what I understand, it's got a lot to do with our development quote, and because I'm not really sure that we, I'm going to get in all kinds of trouble, that we actually evolved from other animals. I think we may have been, and I'll go out on a limb here, I think we may have actually been a manipulation of DNA along the way by something else, which that's pretty controversial. But because there's things that don't make sense of us as a human. To be walking upright is just horrible. But it's possibly what gave us our intelligence, because it allowed our brain to grow in a certain way because of our posture. This was a book that I read, and it's very complicated. But that was the gist that I got from him, is that, our ability to think and to reason, to do what we do, is partially because we started to stand upright. And it helped to develop our brain and our cerebral cortex and all that stuff. But he did, in this book, did point out that it's totally unnatural for us to be walking on two legs. It's much easier if we had stayed, or if we had been crawling like that. It's much easier on our back, our spine. So I don't know. I just thought, well, that's fascinating. Oh, I remember the book. It was called "Humans Aren't from Earth." Pretty controversial. Yeah, it's hilarious. What's interesting is the person who wrote it, I think they're a doctor of whatever, and they're so afraid of getting ostracized by their community, right? That I think they go, okay, well, humans aren't from Earth because blah 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 blah, and then they'd give it was almost like a dialectic where they would have a conversation, and then the other side of the page would be, here's the problems with that, like they were trying to show that. But you could tell from the book that they were leaning towards that we actually aren't from Earth. It was really interesting. I don't know who wrote it, but
I'm definitely gonna check it out. And I like what apparatus, the ability to reason, is actually comedic in the face of such chaos. It's weird that we can even think of anything.
Oh yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's so freaking weird. The idea of I think it's called like metaconsciousness, the ability to be aware of your consciousness, is just fascinating. And the fact that since we can't really communicate too well with other life forms, animals, we don't know if they have it. Because I think for like a long time, especially after like the Enlightenment with like Descartes,
Yeah.
they viewed animals as kind of basically just being machines that didn't have souls.
Yeah.
Kind of like, it's like, they're not really conscious. They're not alive. They're just kind of, it's just food for us.
Right.
And like now we like looking at pretty much anything now, like just at a tree, it's like, oh, it's like, because we don't know what the machinery is needed to have metaconsciousness. We think it's our brain.
Yeah.
That's only because we can't communicate with other life forms.
Right. Well, then we try to anthropomorphize it. We say that,
Yeah.
oh, that squirrel is so cute. Look, he's trying to tell me something. He may not be. Maybe trying to warn himself or other squirrels about you. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't. Okay. We don't know. And there's a hell of a lot more to the natural world. And I think that because of our ego and our almost colonization of the planet in a way, right, to dominate the planet. It's in the Bible. It's put this stuff here for you to do whatever you want to do with, which I don't agree. But there's so much I don't think we know as humans, but it seems like, and my wife hates it when I talk about this, but it seems like our development of we're not even at artificial intelligence yet, or general artificial intelligence. We call it AI, but it's not. But our working towards that is we're creating our own evolution. I mean, as humans, I think it's the first time, in history maybe, that humans have created their own evolution. We are in the midst of creating it, and we're able to see it. That's what's crazy. It's most evolution, which the development of certain limbs and things to adapt to your environment is so gradual and so slow in history that it just goes unnoticed until somebody goes, oh, wow, they used to look like this. And then we start to see that. But we can't really see it until now. We're actually watching our development, because there will come a time where we're going to become, it's the cat's out of the bag. Pandora's box, we're not going to put it back where we're becoming machines, Mm-hmm. And I think in a science fiction world, I think that there'll be those that call themselves pure, and I started to write a story about it, but those that call themselves pure and live in the mountains, which this isn't new, and those who are augmented to the point where they look down upon the purists, right? And if they're augmented, they're going to be a hell of a lot more advantage than we do at survival, right?
Yeah, to a point, because then even every new tool and new technology brings the vulnerability of forgetting how to do things without that technology.
Exactly. And I was doing art the other day. I was on the computer the other day drawing, and I had to do some research. And I thought, what if like Da Vinci was sitting next to me right now? How could I fucking possibly explain what I'm doing? It would be magic. Like any advanced civilization, was it Clark that said that any advanced civilization, would look like magic to the less advanced civilization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
But going back to the technology thing, I think that I know everybody's all hyped up on robots and AI, right? I think that's so cool. But yeah, that's old news, I think. At this point, I think the next wave will be organic machines. We'll be making our own life form very soon.
Oh yeah. Well, they're already growing meat. They're already growing chicken in a lab.
They're growing meat. You can grow replacement organs.
Yeah.
They're doing genetic manipulation. The next medium for artistic endeavors will be flesh. People will be like making their own little animals and creatures, like
What's always fascinated me is there's a line in The Matrix, and it was the agent Smith, I think, talking to Morpheus or something, and he said, I can't really quote it exactly, but he said, I think it was, I want to share a revelation I had with you, and it came to me when I tried to classify your species, and I realized you're not actually mammals, because every mammal on this planet has a natural equilibrium with its surrounding environment, but you humans do not. You move to an area and you multiply and multiply until every natural resource has been consumed. And the only way that you can survive is to spread to another area. And there's one organism on this planet that has that same characteristic. Do you know what that is? And Morpheus goes, and he goes, it's a virus. Humans are a virus. You're a plague and a cancer on this planet. And that always just fascinated me. I went, wow, that's actually a pretty good description. The Coen brothers, I think. Who's that? Thinking, wow,
Brothers.
yeah, thinking, wow, look at
Have
the
you
script.
ever heard of Alan Moore?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so I didn't realize until relatively recently that almost all his movies were originally like, his stuff, like The Watchmen,
right,
the
right.
Wazowski brothers. No, not Wazowski, but
Yeah,
the Wazowski.
yeah, I forget who. I think it was the Wachowski brothers.
Yeah,
I can't remember,
then
but
V for Vendetta
yeah,
and all those good movies. Like I was like, oh, shit, those are originally Alan Moore comics.
right,
Like who, like the dude
right.
that was a
Yeah.
magician, made all these
I
like
had a book. I ran across this. Somebody had mentioned it, or I saw it in some literature. I can't remember the guy's name right now, but he wrote a book, wrote an article or it was an interview. It was an article he did in a newspaper in England, and it was in the 1700s, maybe. I think the 1700s, and it was called Darwin and the Machines. And he goes into this, which you would look at a prophetic vision of machines today. And he describes, goes, and it's in a lot of, I've quoted him a lot of my artwork in certain places because it's fascinating. I'll send you a picture of the cover because it'd be easier to do that. I can't remember his name, but it's like a 50-page article. But he talks about how we're becoming subservient to machines and that one day they will do these things. And he pegged it perfectly. And he was a total Luddite. I mean, he just hated machines. And he was a friend of Darwin's, but they kind of clashed in a friendly way. They clashed, on their opinions. But it was fascinating. When I read it, I read it and I thought, my God, this must have been, who wrote this? Because although the language is a little bit obscure, you still go, that had to have been written like last week. It's fascinating.
I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, where can people find you online?
It was good. It was good, man. It was fun to. What's that? Oh, me online. Yeah. Well, my T-shirt business is alien bugs and stuff, and that's You have to do this on the URL tagline up above because it's not the Google robots. The bots haven't scanned my website yet, so it doesn't pop up on the algorithm. It doesn't pop up on Google. But if you go to www.laughingwolf-creations.com, that's all the T-shirts there, and then there's a link you can click to shops. I think it might be being worked on right now, but that's what it is. And then most all of my art is kind of like a warehouse, and that's at artifactalchemy.com. And that pops up on Google under Artifact Alchemy. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Zeke. It's been really cool talking to you, man.
Yeah, always, man. It's always fascinating.
Yeah.
I'll see you again soon.
Yeah. That'd be cool. All right.
Man.
Thanks, man.
No problem.
Okay.
Peace.
See you later.
Well, it was awesome having Steve on the podcast with us this week, and thank you, Apparatus, for being with us today. It was fun talking with you. You'll have to come in next Saturday at 10. That's when, or whatever time it is where you are now. That's when I'm going to be doing another episode of Saturday Artist Live Interviews podcast. And I will see y'all next week. Have a great day.